cold open. His hand is on my wrist. Not grabbing, not pulling, just there, like he forgot to move it. Like some part of him decided, without asking the rest of him, that he wasn't letting go yet. The hallway is empty. Everyone is still in the ballroom. I can hear the music through the walls. Something slow and expensive. And I'm standing here with a tray I forgot I was holding, and his fingers wrapped around my wrist like a question he doesn't know he's asking. He smells like cedar and something underneath that I don't have a name for. Something that makes my suppressants feel very, very thin. He's looking at me the way people look at something they don't trust themselves to want. And I know that whatever I say in the next 5 seconds is going to cost me something. I just don't know what yet. That's when everything broke. Welcome to the BL Story Room. Subscribe so you don't miss what he does to me. Chapter 1. I wasn't supposed to be at the Mercer Gala. I need to say that first because nothing that happened makes sense unless you understand that I was a substitution. Noah called in sick, or said she did, and my supervisor handed me the assignment at 6:47 p.m. with a uniform that was half a size too small and the words "don't speak unless spoken to" delivered like a threat. Fine. I've been invisible before. I'm good at it. The Mercer estate is the kind of place that makes you feel poor just by existing in it. Not because it's showy, it isn't. It's worse than showy. It's quiet about its money. Dark wood, low light, flowers that probably have names I'd have to look up. The guests move through it like they belong to it, not the other way around. I belong to the catering staff. I kept my eyes down and my tray level, and I did not think about the fact that 3 of the guests standing near the east window were directly connected to the man I'd been investigating for 4 months. I did not think about that at all. I was doing fine. I was doing completely fine until I heard it. Not a shout. That would have been easier to ignore. It was quiet. The particular quiet of a room deciding collectively to let something happen. A shift in the air. The way conversations nearby lower just enough to listen without looking. I looked. There were 4 of them. All alphas from the way they carried themselves. That specific ease that comes from never having had to make themselves smaller. And in the middle of them was a man I recognized from the file on my phone. Though the file hadn't prepared me for the reality of him. Kale Voss, former CEO of Voss Capital. Stripped of board position 8 months ago after what the press called a pattern of erratic behavior and compromised judgment. His own company, his own people. They'd taken everything and left him the name as a courtesy. He was standing very still. That was the thing I noticed first. Not his face, not the tension in his shoulders, but the stillness. The way someone goes still when they've decided the only thing left they can control is their own body. One of the 4 men said something I couldn't fully hear. Something with the word embarrassment in it. Then a laugh. The kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. Kale didn't move. Another one spoke. Louder this time. Something about the rumors. Something about Omegas. Like the word soft used as a weapon. I was already walking before I decided to. I should say that clearly. I did not make a choice. My feet made it. My body, which is sometimes smarter and sometimes catastrophically stupider than my brain, just moved through the gap between 2 guests. Tray still in my hand. Stopping just close enough that I was impossible to ignore. I looked directly at the one who'd been speaking. "Sir." My voice came out even. I don't know how. "Can I get anything for you?" Not a confrontation, not a defense, just presence. A redirect. The social pressure of being watched by staff, which the wealthy hate more than almost anything because it makes them visible when they want to be private. He looked at me. Really looked? The kind of look that's meant to remind you what you are. No, he said. Flat. I see. You can't. Of course. I smiled the smile I've practiced, the one that doesn't reach anywhere. Let me know if that changes. And I turned to Kale. I don't know what I expected. Gratitude, maybe, relief. Something soft. He looked at me like I'd insulted him. I didn't need that, he said. Low, controlled. The voice of someone who has spent years making sure nothing leaks. I know, I said. Then why? Your glass is empty. I nodded at his hand. Would you like another? He stared at me for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. Then something crossed his face. Fast. Gone. Before I could name it. And he held out the glass. I took it. Our fingers didn't touch. I made sure of that. I walked back to the bar and stood there for a moment with his glass in my hand and my heart doing something completely unprofessional in my chest. He's just a target, I told myself. He's just a name in a file. I would regret that thought later. I just didn't know how much yet. I brought him a fresh drink 12 minutes later. He was alone by then, standing near the window, and when I approached, he didn't look at me, just took the glass from the tray without acknowledgement. I was almost relieved. Then, quietly, without turning, Ren. I froze. I hadn't told him my name. Stay with me. Because what he says next is the end moment I stopped being able to pretend this was simple. Chapter 2. Nobody says my name like that, not the way he said it, quiet, certain, like he'd been holding it in his mouth for a while before deciding to release it. Not a question, not a test. Just my name, dropped into the space between us like he had a right to it. I kept my face still. I'm good at that. No, you have the wrong person, I said. Ren. Again. Same tone. Short for something, probably. You move like someone who's used to smaller spaces than this. You scan every room when you enter it. Left to right, not right to left. Which means you were trained, not just cautious. And you intervened back there in a way that was precise, controlled. That wasn't kindness. That was technique. I turned to look at him then. That was my first mistake. Up close, Kale Voss is different from the file. The file had press photos, polished things, him at podiums, him at openings, the particular performance of a man who runs things. This version was stripped of all that, no performance left. Just the structure underneath it. There was a tiredness around his eyes that looked old. Not tonight tired. Years tired. I noticed that before I could stop myself noticing it. I'm catering staff, I said. Sir. The sir landed wrong and we both heard it. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, the ghost of one. Like his face remembered how but wasn't sure it was allowed anymore. Of course, he said, and looked back out the window. I should have walked away. I keep coming back to this part. I don't know why. I should have taken my tray and my too small uniform and my carefully maintained invisibility, and I should have walked directly back to the bar and not looked back. That was the job. That was the only job I was supposed to be doing here. Instead, I said, "How did you know my name?" Your colleague called it across the room earlier, when she handed you the wrong order. A pause. I pay attention to things. Oh, that was mundane. Completely mundane. My body had been preparing for something dangerous, and the answer was just your colleague was loud, and suddenly I felt slightly ridiculous, which I hate, which meant my voice came out sharper than I meant it to. Then you also paid attention to the fact that those men were humiliating you for 10 minutes before I walked over. Silence. Not comfortable silence. The kind that has edges. Yes, he said finally. I did. And you were just going to stand there. I've stood through worse. No self-pity in it, just fact. That was almost worse than self-pity. I looked at him, really looked, the way I'd been carefully not doing. And I saw it. The thing the file hadn't told me? Kale Voss wasn't broken. He was something more specific than broken. He was a person who had decided, somewhere in the last 8 months, that he deserved what was happening to him. That specific kind of damage, I recognized it because I've felt it before, a long time ago, in a version of myself I don't visit. You didn't deserve that, I said. He turned to look at me fully for the first time. The eye contact was, I'm not going to describe it as anything dramatic because it wasn't. It was just direct. He looked at me the way people rarely look at staff, like I was an actual person with actual mass who was actually standing in front of him, and something about that directness made my suppressants feel thin again in a way that had nothing to do with biology. You don't know me, he said. No, I agreed. But I know what that looks like. What they were doing. Another silence. Different quality this time. Why are you still standing here? He asked. Not unkind, genuinely asking. Good question, I should have walked away. I knew it then the same way I know it now. Every operational instinct I had was sending the same signal. This man is a complication. This man is a variable. This man is not the assignment. Your drink needed refreshing, I said. He looked down at his glass, still 3/4 full. When he looked back up, there was something in his expression I couldn't read, and I've spent 4 years learning to read people. Ren, he said for the third time, like he was deciding something about the word. I have other guests, I said. You do, he agreed. I walked away, steady, even, every step exactly as deliberate as the last. I did not look back. At least, that's what I told myself. For about 40 seconds, until I was back at the bar and my hands were doing the automatic work of loading a tray, and I realized that the base of my neck was warm. That specific warmth, the kind that has nothing to do with the room temperature. The kind that means an alpha's attention is still on you from across the room. I didn't turn around to confirm it. I focused on the tray, on the glasses, on the job, the real job, the one that had nothing to do with a disgraced CEO with tired eyes and a voice that said my name like punctuation. 40 minutes later, the gala began to thin, guests peeling off in pairs and small clusters, the music dropping to something quieter. I was collecting empties from a side table when I felt it. A shift in the air, the specific atmospheric change of someone approaching from behind who isn't trying to be quiet but isn't trying to be heard either. I turned. It wasn't Kale. It was one of the four, the one who'd spoken loudest. He was looking at me with an expression I recognized immediately, the one men get when they've decided that someone who embarrassed them in public needs to understand the error privately. You're the maid who interrupted us earlier, he said. I kept my face pleasant. I was doing my job, sir. Your job, he repeated, slow, deliberate, is to serve drinks, not to insert yourself into conversations between guests. You're right, I said. I apologize if it came across that way. Agreeable, deferential, invisible. He stepped closer, just slightly. Just enough to use his height as a sentence. Who are you with? He asked. Who sent you? And there it was. Not who do you work for, the natural question for a maid, but who sent you? The specific paranoia of a man who has things to protect. I noted that, filed it, kept my face soft and confused. The catering company, sir. I can give you the... Ren! Kale's voice. Behind me. Close. I hadn't heard him approach. I didn't know how that was possible. He stepped up beside me, not in front of me, beside, and looked at the other man with an expression so flat it functioned as a wall. "I've been looking for you," Kyle said to me, as if the other man wasn't there. The host wants the East Terrace cleared. A lie. Obviously a lie. We both knew it. "Of course," I said. The other man looked between us, something calculating moving behind his eyes. Then he straightened, adjusted his jacket, and walked away without another word. I waited until he was gone. Then, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Kyle said. He was very close. I hadn't realized how close until the warmth of him reached me before I could prepare for it. That cedar and underneath smell stronger now, and my suppressants doing absolutely nothing useful. "Now we're even," he said. He walked away before I could answer. I stood there with an empty tray and a warm neck, and the slow sinking realization that a man I was supposed to be investigating had just protected me, and that I had let him. I didn't understand then what I understand now. That was the last moment I could have walked away clean. Chapter 3. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of Kale. That's what I told myself at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling of my apartment with the window cracked and the city doing its low, indifferent hum outside. Not because of him. Because of the other man. Because of the way he'd said, "Who sent you?" Like he already suspected the answer and just wanted to watch my face when I lied. His name was Dorian Mercer, youngest son of the family that owned the estate. On paper, philanthropist, arts patron, board member of 4 separate foundations. In the file on my encrypted drive, suspected architect of the Omega data trafficking network I'd been embedded to dismantle for the last 4 months. He'd looked at me and felt something was wrong. That was a problem. That was the only thing keeping me awake. I made tea I didn't drink and sat at my small table and opened the file and looked at Kyle Voss's photo for a long time. The photo didn't look back, obviously, but it also didn't tell me what to do with the fact that he'd stepped beside me. Not in front, beside, and lied smoothly to a dangerous man on my behalf without asking for anything in return. People don't do things without wanting something in return. That's not cynicism. That's just the field. I closed the file, took my suppressants. 2, because the warmth at the base of my neck was still there, faint but present, like an ember that hadn't decided yet whether to go out. I went to bed. I did not think about Cedar. The agency rotated my assignment 3 days later. New estate, different family, same circuit. The Aldine Foundation's quarterly dinner, smaller than the Mercer Gala, more curated. The kind of event where every guest knows exactly why every other guest was invited. I found out Kale would be there 4 hours before I was supposed to arrive. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, and I had a completely professional, completely logical internal debate about whether to flag it to my handler, and at the end of the debate, I flagged nothing and put my phone face down on the counter. Looking back, that was the last normal moment. He was already there when I arrived, standing near the bar, alone, with a glass of something he wasn't drinking, wearing a dark suit that fit him the way expensive things fit people who've stopped caring whether expensive things fit them, which is to say perfectly, effortlessly, like an afterthought. I clocked him the way I clock everyone: threat assessment, position, exits. His eyes found me before I finished the sweep. Not a surprise, not a lingering look, just recognition. Like noting a landmark, I looked away first. For 40 minutes, I was a maid, efficient, invisible, present. I moved through the room, and I listened to conversations, and I filed things, and I did not drift toward the bar. Then my suppressants started failing. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in stories, no sudden heat, no loss of control. It was subtle. The way the edge of the room sharpens when your body starts prioritizing different information. The way certain smells arrive before your brain has permission to notice them, cedar, and underneath it, something warmer. Something that my biology, unhelpfully, had apparently decided to catalog and remember. I excused myself to the hallway. The hallway was quiet, long, carpeted, lined with the kind of art that costs more than my annual salary. I found an alcove near a window and stood there and focused on my breathing the way I'd been trained to. The slow, counted pattern that tells your nervous system to stand down. It was working. It was completely working. "You're doing the breathing thing." I turned around. Kale was leaning against the opposite wall with his arms crossed and his glass still in his hand, watching me with an expression I was beginning to recognize as his default. Unreadable, but not unkind. Like he was deciding how much to let through. "I was getting some air," I said. "The window's closed." I was thinking about opening it. Something moved in his expression. Not the ghost of a smile this time, something quieter. "How long?" he asked. I looked at him. "The suppressants," he said. Matter of fact. No pity in it, which I appreciated more than I should have. "Well, how long have they been failing?" I could have denied it. I'm good at denial. I've built a career on it. Instead, I heard myself say, "An hour, maybe a little more." He nodded, like this was information he was filing. "There's a side room 2 doors down," he said. "Used for coat storage, small, no scent contamination from the main room. If you need 10 minutes. I stared at him. "Why do you know that?" "I checked when I arrived." A pause. "I always check." "Why would you?" "Because I've spent the last 8 months attending events where I'm the person everyone wants to watch fall apart." Flat. Quiet. "I know where the exits are. I know where the quiet rooms are. I know which wait staff are actually staff and which ones are watching something specific." His eyes stayed on mine. "I know what failing suppressants look like." My mother was an Omega. The information landed differently than I expected. I didn't say anything. 2 doors down," he said again. Then he pushed off the wall and walked back toward the main room without looking back. I stood in the alcove for another moment. Then I went 2 doors down. The room was exactly what he'd said. Small, dim, smelling of wool coats and cedar hangers and nothing else. I sat on a narrow bench and did the breathing and took my emergency half dose and waited for my body to remember what it was supposed to be doing. 10 minutes. I came out and he was standing in the hallway, not waiting or not visibly waiting, just there, examining a painting with the focused attention of a man who may or may not have been counting minutes. "Better?" he asked without turning. "I'm fine," I said. That wasn't what I asked. A beat. "Better," I said. He turned then and looked at me the way he'd looked at me at the Mercer Gala, that direct, actual person look that I still didn't know what to do with. "You should tell your handler," he said. "If the suppressants are failing this close to Dorian Mercer's network, you need a higher grade formula or a rotation out." The world stopped. Just for a second. Just long enough for my training to catch up with what my face wanted to do. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. Very calm, very even. Kale looked at me for a long moment. "Of course," he said. "My mistake." He walked away. And I stood there in the hallway of the Aldine Foundation dinner with a half dose of emergency suppressant in my bloodstream and the absolute certain knowledge that Kale Voss knew exactly who I was. The question, the one that kept me awake again that night, that sat in my chest like something swallowed wrong wasn't whether he'd expose me. It was why he hadn't. He didn't know it yet. But what he chose to do next would cost us both everything. What he said next, nothing prepared me for it. Chapter 4. He texted me at 11 p.m. I don't know how he got my number. That's the part I keep getting stuck on. Not the message itself, not what it said, but the simple fact that he had a number that doesn't exist on any public record that I change every 6 weeks, that is registered to a name that isn't mine. He had it. The message was 4 words. Don't go tomorrow night. I stared at it for a long time, long enough that my tea went cold again, long enough that the city outside shifted from its late-night register into something quieter and more honest. Then I typed, wrong number. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, the Harlan reception, don't go. I put my phone face down, picked it up again. Who are you protecting? I typed, then deleted it. Too direct, too much acknowledgement. I typed, I don't know what reception you mean. His response came immediately this time. Yes, you do. And Dorian will have someone there specifically watching for you. He made calls after the Aldine dinner. I heard 2 of them. I sat very still. This was either the most elaborate compromise operation I'd ever encountered, or Kale Voss was exactly what he appeared to be in this specific moment. A man with access to dangerous information, or choosing to hand it to me instead of use it. Neither option made sense. Both options made my chest do something inconvenient. Why are you telling me this? I typed. A long pause this time. Long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, because someone should have told my mother things like this when she needed to hear them. I read that 3 times. Then I put my phone down and didn't pick it up again until morning. I went to the Harlan reception anyway, of course I did. I'm not built for standing down. My handler would tell you that's my primary professional liability, and he wouldn't be wrong. But I went differently. New uniform, different agency cover, hair changed, suppressants doubled, even though doubling them gave me a headache that sat behind my left eye like a slow nail. I also went 2 hours early and mapped every exit. The reception was smaller than the previous events. Intimate. The kind of gathering where absence is noticed and presence is remembered. Dorian Mercer arrived at 8 with 2 men I recognized from surveillance photos of me. Mid-level connectors in the network, the kind of people who move information between the people who matter. I stayed peripheral, invisible. I was good at this. For 90 minutes, I was a ghost. Then I saw Kale. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't on any list I'd seen, wasn't connected to the Harlan family, had no visible reason to be standing near the window in a room full of people who considered him a cautionary tale. He also looked immediately at me the moment I processed his presence, like he'd known exactly where I was standing before he turned. We looked at each other across the room. His expression said, I told you not to come. Mine said, I know. Then Dorian Mercer moved. Not toward me, toward Kale. I watched it happen from across the room. The approach, the handshake, the particular body language of 2 men performing cordiality while measuring each other. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't get closer without breaking my cover. I stood with my tray, and I watched Dorian lean in and say something close to Kale's ear, and I watched Kale's jaw tighten. Just slightly. Just enough. Then Dorian looked up, directly across the room, and looked directly at me. Not at the space near me, not in my general direction, at me. I kept my face neutral. I refreshed a nearby guest's glass. I did not run. Dorian smiled. The specific smile of a man who has just confirmed something he suspected. Then he turned back to Kale and said something else and walked away. Kale didn't move for a moment. Then he picked up a fresh drink from a passing tray and walked, slowly, unhurried. The walk of a man going nowhere in particular, toward the east corridor. I waited 4 minutes. Then I followed. The corridor was empty. He was standing at the far end near a fire door, and when I reached him, he turned, and the look on his face was the first unguarded thing I'd seen from him. Not anger. Something more complicated than anger. "He knows your face," Kyle said, low. "Not your name, not your agency. But your face is burned now. This is your last event on this circuit." "What did he say to you?" "That he'd noticed I had a type." A pause. "He meant it as an insult." I processed that. "What did you say back?" Something crossed his face. Nothing useful. We were standing closer than we should have been. The corridor was narrow, and the fire door at his back meant he wasn't moving, and I'd stopped at a distance that made operational sense and absolutely no other kind of sense. I could smell him. Cedar in that underneath thing, and faintly underneath everything, something that my doubled suppressants were doing an incomplete job of processing. "You came anyway," he said. Not accusatory. Almost. Tired. "It's my assignment." "Your assignment is going to get you killed." "You don't know anything about my assignment." "I know Dorian Mercer had an Omega analyst disappeared 18 months ago when she got close to the network's financial layer." His voice stayed even. "I know because she worked for a firm that used to do business with mine, before everything." A beat. Chama before. The word landed with the weight of everything it was holding. I looked at him. "How long have you known about the network?" I asked. "Long enough." He looked away. At the wall. At something the wall wasn't showing him. The things they used to take my company. The evidence, the board votes, the rumors. Dorian built all of it. I didn't understand that until 6 months ago. By then I had no leverage and no one who believed me. "Why didn't you go to... who?" He looked back at me. Just that. Just who? And the flatness of it closed the sentence completely. I understood then. No authority he could trust. No institution that hadn't already accepted Dorian's version of events. Just a man standing in the wreckage of his own life, holding information that could destroy him further if he used it wrong. And me, standing in a corridor with compromised suppressants and a blown cover, and the slow sinking, completely unacceptable realization that I trusted him. Not fully, not without question, but enough. Enough was dangerous. "I need to report this conversation," I said. "I need to tell my handler that you're a potential asset," he said. "Say it. That you have relevant information." He nodded. Like he'd expected it. Like he'd made peace with it before I arrived. "Okay," he said. "Just that. Okay." I don't know what I expected. Resistance, maybe. Negotiation. Something that would make this easier to categorize. Instead, he reached into his jacket and held out a folded piece of paper. I took it. Our fingers touched this time. I didn't make sure they didn't. The paper was warm from being against his chest. I unfolded it carefully. Inside, a series of dates, locations, names, clean handwriting, deliberate. The kind of list a person makes when they've been building it slowly over months, when they had nothing else to do with the knowing. "That's everything I have," he said. "It won't be enough on its own, but it's a start." I looked up at him. "Why?" I asked. "Not professionally. Actually." He was quiet for a moment. because someone should have stopped this before my mother lost everything trying to survive it. His voice didn't break. It did something more controlled and therefore more devastating. It just went very, very quiet. And because you came back, even after I told you not to. And I think he stopped. What? He shook his head slightly, not unwilling, unready. Nothing, he said. Go report your asset. I left. I walked back through the reception with a piece of paper warm from his chest in my pocket and his unfinished sentence sitting in the space behind my sternum like a splinter. I think what, Kale? I didn't sleep again that night. I reported the asset. I filed the information. I did everything correctly and professionally and by the book. And then I lay in the dark and thought about the way his fingers had felt against mine for the 2 seconds I hadn't pulled away. Warm, that was the thing. Just warm. I should have left. I didn't. And that decision changed everything. What comes next, I still can't believe it happened to me. Chapter 5. My handler's name is CO. He's 53, drinks too much green tea, and has the specific energy of a man who has seen every possible way an undercover operation can collapse and has personally witnessed most of them. He looked at Kale's list for a long time without speaking, which with CO means something is either very good or very bad and you won't know which until the sentence starts. He just gave this to you, CO said. Yes? Voluntarily, yes. An alpha who lost everything to Dorian Mercer's network just handed you 4 months of compiled intelligence because he wants Dorian stopped, I said, and because he has no other way to do it. Sayo looked at me over the paper. I kept my face professional. How are your suppressants? He said, not a question. Fine. Ren? They're manageable. He set the paper down, folded his hands over it in the way he does when he's about to say something I won't like. I'm pulling you from the circuit, he said. Dorian has your face. That's a full burn. We'll need to rebuild your cover from... Give me 2 more weeks. That's not how burns work. Kale has access Dorian doesn't know about. He's been inside that network socially for years. He knows the structure, the players, the properties. 2 weeks with him as a cooperative asset, and we have enough to move on Dorian directly instead of working the edges for another 6 months. CO was quiet. Outside his window, the city did its indifferent thing. 2 weeks, he said finally, and you report every contact. Every contact, I agreed. I did not think about warm fingers. Kale's apartment was nothing like I expected. I don't know what I expected. On something that matched the file, maybe. The before version of him. Glass and sharp lines, and the aesthetic of a man who controlled things. Instead, it was quiet. Books that had actually been read, their spines bent and soft. A kitchen that smelled like someone cooked in it. Plants on the windowsill that were slightly overgrown, like he kept meaning to deal with them and kept finding other things to think about. He opened the door and looked at me for a moment without speaking. My handler approved the asset relationship, I said. Come in, he said. I came in. We sat at his kitchen table with the list between us, and I asked questions, and he answered them, and for 2 hours it was completely operational. Clean. Professional. He was precise and organized, and gave information the way someone gives it when they've been waiting to give it, with the specific relief of a weight being shared. I took notes. I asked follow-up questions. I did not notice the way the kitchen light made the tiredness around his eyes look different, softer, like tiredness that belonged to a person instead of a performance. I did not notice that. Then he made tea, without asking if I wanted any, and set a cup in front of me and sat back down, and the domesticity of it was so unexpected that I lost my next question entirely. You went quiet, he said. I'm thinking. You stopped writing. I'm thinking, I said again. He looked at his own cup, turned it slightly on the table. A small unconscious thing. The gesture of someone whose hands need something to do when their mind is working. Ask it, he said. Ask what? Whatever you've been not asking for the last 20 minutes. I looked at him. What did Dorian mean? I said carefully. When he said he noticed you had a type? The silence that followed had a shape, rectangular, like a door. Kyle turned his cup again. Dorian has known me a long time, he said. Before the board, before everything. A pause. He knows that I don't do well with people who perform, who say the expected thing. He watched me for years choose the wrong people for the right reasons, and he thinks that makes me predictable. Does it? Probably. He looked up. You didn't perform at the Mercer Gala. Everyone in that room was performing something, and you walked over and you just intervened, like it was the obvious thing, like you didn't calculate it first. I did calculate it. I know, he said. I could tell. That was the part that got me. The kitchen was very quiet. My suppressants were doing their job. They were doing their job completely. The warmth at the base of my neck was just warmth. The way the room smelled was just a room. Everything was operational and professional and fine. Ren, he said. Don't, I said. He stopped. Not offended, not withdrawn. Just stopped. The way someone stops when they understand the request. Okay, he said. We went back to the list. But the word he hadn't finished sat between us on the table like a third cup of tea, and every time I reached past it to point at something on the list, my arm passed through the space where it was sitting, and I felt it anyway. We met 4 more times that week. Always the kitchen table. Always the list. Always tea. I didn't ask for that appeared in front of me, like he decided it was just what happened now. I learned things about him that weren't in the file. He cooked when he couldn't sleep, which meant there were often containers in his fridge that he'd made at 3 a.m. Nothing elaborate, just careful. The kind of food that requires attention and gives it back. He read histories of failed things, companies, expeditions, civilizations, not morbidly, analytically. Like he was trying to understand the exact moment something became unfixable. He asked me questions, not about the case. About me, carefully, in the way of someone who knows they're not supposed to but can't fully stop. Where did I grow up? Whether I liked this work or just needed it, whether I had people. I answered in the operational minimum, short, true enough to not be lies, empty enough to not be real. He accepted that every time, without pressure. That was somehow the most disarming thing about him. On the 5th night I arrived, and the list was already on the table, but he was standing at the window instead of sitting, and something in the set of his shoulders told me before he spoke that something had shifted. Dorian is moving the timeline, he said. Whatever he's been building toward, it's happening in 10 days, not 6 weeks. I sat down slowly. How do you know? He called me. Kale turned from the window. He wants to meet. Says he has a proposition, something about bringing me back in. A board position, rehabilitation of my reputation, the whole architecture of a second chance. His voice was even. In exchange for information about the investigation he believes is targeting him. The room went very still. He thinks you'll do it, I said. He thinks I'm desperate enough. A pause. He's not entirely wrong about the desperate part. He's wrong about what I do with it. I looked at him. Ren. He said it the way he always said it, like punctuation. like the word meant more than one thing. If I meet with him, I can get you the timeline, the location, everything you need to move before he disappears the evidence. He paused. But it puts me in the room with him. And Dorian is very good at reading people. You can't, I said. Too fast. He noticed the too fast. I noticed him noticing it. The kitchen was doing that thing again, shrinking somehow, the way small spaces do when the air in them changes quality. He was standing and I was sitting. And the distance between us was professional and appropriate, and I was acutely, completely aware of every centimeter of it. I've been in rooms with Dorian my whole adult life, Kale said quietly. I know how he moves. I know what he wants to see. He paused. I can do this. It's not about whether you can. Then what's it about? I didn't answer. I couldn't answer without saying something true, and saying something true would mean admitting something I'd spent 10 days carefully not admitting. And if I admitted it, then this, the kitchen, the tea, the list, the thing that lived in the space between us that neither of us had named, would have to become something else entirely, something with stakes, something that could be lost. He crossed the kitchen. He stopped in front of me, not close enough to be anything, just close enough that I had to look up to look at him. And he looked down at me with that expression I still couldn't fully read, the one that let just enough through to be devastating. I'm going to meet him, he said softly. And when I come back, I'm going to finish that sentence, the one from the corridor. My heart did something that had no professional classification. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. He didn't move. I want to. The warmth at the base of my neck spread, slow, certain. My suppressants registered it and did absolutely nothing useful, and I sat very still in his kitchen chair and looked up at him and thought about cedar and about my mother telling me once that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't hate, it's someone who makes you feel safe. Come back then, I heard myself say. Something moved across his face, fast. Real. He stepped back, picked up his jacket from the chair. And at the door, he paused without turning, the way he did sometimes. Like he was deciding whether to leave the thing he was thinking inside or bring it out. He brought it out. Your suppressants have been failing for 3 days, he said quietly. I didn't say anything because I didn't want you to leave. That was selfish. I'm sorry. The door closed behind him. I sat in his kitchen that smelled like cedar and 3 a.m. cooking, and I pressed my fingers against the base of my neck where the warmth was, and I thought, I should have walked away. I should have walked away. I should have. I keep coming back to this part. I don't know why. What he walks into next is the moment everything changes. And I would have given anything to have stopped him. Chapter 6. He was supposed to be back by midnight. I know that's not a professional way to track an asset. Assets don't have curfews. Assets don't have people sitting in their kitchens at 11:47 p.m. watching the door like watching it will do something useful. That's not how any of this works. And I know that. I've always known that. And yet, 11:47, 11:52, the tea I'd made had gone cold an hour ago. The list was on the table in front of me, but I'd stopped seeing it around 10 p.m. Outside the window, the city was doing its late-night thing. That specific quality of urban silence that isn't really silence, just the absence of the daytime register. A car. A distant door, with the low mechanical breath of a building existing. 11:58. I took my suppressants, both doses, then sat back down and looked at the door. The warmth at the base of my neck had been there all evening, low, constant, unhelpful. Not the sharp spike of proximity, the slower kind. The kind that apparently develops when someone has been standing close to you in a small kitchen for 10 consecutive days, and your biology has quietly, without consulting you, begun to recognize them. I hadn't told Sayo about that part. I hadn't told myself about that part until just now. 11:59 p.m., alone in Kale's kitchen, which was probably the worst possible timing. 12:03. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it faster than I should have. It was Sayo. Dorian's location just went dark. Driver dismissed early, phone off. Whatever is happening tonight is happening off record. I was already standing. Don't move yet, Sayo sent. We don't have eyes on the meet location. I know the location, I typed back. Because I did, Kale had told me before he left. A private dining room in a members-only club in the East Quarter. The kind of place that exists specifically to not be found. 3 dots from CO. Disappearing. Appearing. Wait for backup. I looked at the door. I thought about Cedar. I thought about when I come back I'm going to finish that sentence. Backup ETA I sent. 40 minutes minimum. I put my phone in my pocket and picked up my jacket. The club was called Aldrich's, which wasn't its real name. Its real name existed only in the founding documents of a holding company registered in a jurisdiction with strong privacy laws. From the outside, it looked like a private residence. Dark stone. No signage. The kind of door that doesn't have a handle on the outside. I knew a service entrance around the back, because of course there was a service entrance, and of course I'd mapped it when Kale told me the location, because that is what I do. It's what I always do. It has nothing to do with anything except professionalism. The entrance was unlocked. That was wrong. I stood in the service corridor and felt the wrongness of it settle into my chest. Unlocked doors in secure locations mean someone expected to need an exit, or someone wanted to create one. Neither was good. I moved through the corridor slowly. The building had the specific silence of a place where sound is being absorbed deliberately. Thick walls, heavy furnishings. The architectural equivalent of a held breath. The private dining room was at the end of the east hallway. I heard Dorian's voice before I reached the door. Low, measured, with the cadence of someone who has decided the conversation is going exactly as planned. I couldn't make out words yet. Then I heard Kale. His voice. And I registered something in myself that I don't have clean language for, something that was equal parts he's alive, and I can tell from his voice that something is wrong. I reached the door, slightly ajar. I stayed to the side of it, outside the visual field of anyone inside, and listened. Understand you're angry, Dorian was saying. I understand the last year has been, don't. Kale's voice, flat, controlled. Don't do the thing where you name my feelings for me. You stopped having the right to that a long time ago. A pause. You came, Dorian said. Something shifted in his tone, quieter. Despite everything, you came. That means something. It means I want to hear what you're offering. And nothing else? Another pause. Kyle, we've known each other for 15 years. I know, Kyle said. That's the part I keep trying to understand. Silence. Then Dorian. The Omega, the one working the circuit. She's the one you're feeding, isn't she? My entire body went still. She, he'd said. Wrong pronoun. My cover had run female on the staff manifests. He had a face, a gender assumption, and an operational suspicion. But not a name, not an agency. Not yet. I don't know what you're talking about, Kale said. Kale, I told you. I'm here for the proposition. And I'm telling you, the proposition has a condition. Dorian's voice had changed, not threatening, which would have been easier. Gentle, regretful. Not the tone of someone delivering bad news to someone they claim to care about. Give me the operative. Name, agency, handler. Do that and everything I took comes back. your company, your reputation, your life. The room was so quiet I could hear the particular quality of Kale's breathing. I pressed myself against the wall. Don't, I thought, at him, across the wall. Like thinking it hard enough would travel. Don't. And if I don't, Kale said, then the secondary package I've been holding for 8 months gets released. The fabricated evidence was just the beginning, Kyle. What I have left would end you permanently. Not professionally, personally. The kind of things that follow a person into whatever small life they rebuild. A pause. I've always liked you. I don't want to use it. Silence. 15 seconds of it, 20. I counted because I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't reaching for the door. Then Kale said, "Give me a moment." Footsteps. The chair scraping. My heart doing something with no clinical name. The door opened and Kale stepped into the hallway and saw me, and his face did something complicated and fast. Relief and alarm and something underneath both of those that he shut down immediately. He pulled the door nearly closed behind him. We were 6 inches apart in a dark hallway, and his jaw was tight and his eyes were doing the thing where they let just enough through. And what was coming through right now was, he'd known I'd come. He'd been stalling. How long, he breathed. The word barely had sound. Long enough, I mouthed back. Something moved across his face. Across his whole face. Not just the controlled upper register. Something that went through him and came out the other side and left him looking for just a second, like a person who had stopped managing what showed. He reached up, his hand, warm, certain, came to rest against the side of my face just for a second, his thumb at my jaw, his palm against my cheek. The specific weight of a touch that has been decided. My suppressants collapsed completely. Not the slow failing, the sudden kind, the kind that drops every filter simultaneously and leaves you with just the raw biological fact of an alpha close enough to touch, wanting something, and your body responding to that wanting before your mind has finished forming the objection. Cedar. And underneath it, something that wasn't cedar, something specific and warm, and mine, somehow, already categorized somewhere deep in my nervous system as safe. I had approximately 4 seconds before this became physiologically visible. I stepped back. His hand fell. We looked at each other in the dark hallway, and the space between us was 6 inches and also infinite, and also neither of those things. "I'm not giving him anything," he said. Voice controlled again, barely. "I just needed you to know that before whatever happens in the next 5 minutes." "Nothing happens in the next 5 minutes," I said. "You go back in. You stall. Backup is 12 minutes out." "He'll know." "He already suspects. There's a difference." I held his gaze. "Kale, 12 minutes. He looked at me, at my face. Then lower. Just briefly. Just the jaw, the throat, on the specific place where scent glands sit. And something in his expression went very quiet and very focused in a way that my compromised suppressants processed as a full body temperature shift. "Your suppressants," he said softly. "I know." "Ren, 12 minutes, I said. Go." He went. The door closed behind him, and I stood in the hallway and pressed my back against the wall and pressed my hand against the base of my throat and breathed. Counted. Waited for my own body to remember what it was supposed to be doing. It didn't cooperate. From inside the room, I heard Dorian say, "Well?" And Kale, steady as architecture, "I need more time to consider." "You've had 8 months." "I need more time," Kale said again. 11 minutes. I counted every one of them. Backup arrived in 9. Dorian was detained without incident, clean, fast. the way operations go when everything finally lines up after months of near misses. His 2 associates were picked up at separate locations within the hour. SEO called it a success, clean, contained. I stood outside Aldrich's in the cold air and watched the vehicles leave and felt nothing that matched the word success. Kale came out 20 minutes after the detainment. He'd been interviewed on site, cooperative, thorough, already arranging with CO's team for a formal debrief. He was good at this, being useful, having a function. He came and stood beside me, not close, appropriate distance. The air between us was cold and clean, and my suppressants had partially restabilized and everything was manageable. We stood there for a moment without speaking. "You came," he said finally. I was already in the building. Before that, "You were in my kitchen." I didn't answer. "You were in my kitchen at midnight," he said quietly, waiting. The word waiting sat between us and did its damage quietly. "It was an operational decision," I said. "Ren. The asset was Ren. Not sharp, not demanding, just my name, the way he said it, that specific way. Stop." I stopped. The city breathed around us. Somewhere behind us, a door closed. A car moved away. The ordinary sounds of a thing ending. "I'm going to finish the sentence," he said. "Kale, I think you came back to the Mercer Gala because you needed something to be real." His voice was quiet. Even. Like he'd thought about this for a long time, and had finally decided the cost of saying it was lower than the cost of not saying it. Not the operation, not the cover, something real. And I think I recognize that because I've been looking for the same thing for 8 months in a life that stopped feeling real the day Dorian took it apart. He paused. "I think that's why I said your name. Before I knew anything about you. I just needed to say something true." The cold air sat in my lungs. I thought about the kitchen, the tea, the overgrown plants, the 3 AM containers in the fridge. I thought about a man who makes himself smaller in rooms full of people who once made him large, who maps the quiet rooms, who knew about my suppressants and said nothing because he didn't want me to leave. I should have walked away. "That was the sentence?" I said. "That was the sentence." I looked at him. The cold had brought color to his face, and the tiredness around his eyes looked different again. Not old tired, just tonight tired, not the honest kind. "It's a long sentence," I said. Something moved across his face, warm, real. The full version of the ghost of a smile finally allowed. "I had 8 months of things I couldn't say to anyone," he said. It built up. I looked away. At the street. At the ordinary dark of a city that had no idea what had just happened inside one of its buildings. I keep coming back to this part. "My operation is closing," I said. "When it does, I won't be on the circuit anymore. My handler will rotate me. New cover, new location." I paused. That's just how it works." "I know," he said. "So whatever..." I stopped. Started again. "Whatever this is, there are structural limitations. I know that too. I'm telling you so that..." "Ren." Quiet. "I know. I'm not asking for a promise. I'm just finishing a sentence I started in a hallway 3 weeks ago because I've spent 8 months not saying true things and I'm very tired of it." The city breathed. My neck was warm. I said nothing for a long time. Then, "Cedar." He looked at me. "That's what you smell like," I said very quietly, to the street ahead of me. "Cedar and something underneath that I don't have a name for. I noticed it at the Mercer Gala, and it's very..." I stopped. "My suppressants have been failing since the second event. SEO thinks it's the dosage. It isn't the dosage." Silence. Then Kale, carefully, like handling something that matters. What is it? I closed my eyes briefly. I don't know yet, I said. I'm still figuring that out. When I opened them, he was looking at me with an expression I finally had a name for. Wanting. Patient. Careful. Certain. Wanting. The kind that has decided to wait. We stood outside in the cold for another few minutes without speaking. Not because there was nothing to say, because some things are better carried a little longer before they're put down. I should have known then that this was already the point of no return. I just didn't understand what that meant yet. Not until the morning CO told me something that changed the shape of everything. Chapter 7. The debrief was at 9 a.m. CO's office has one window that faces a concrete wall, which I've always thought was either an accident or a personality statement. He was already on his third green tea when I arrived, which meant he'd been there since before sunrise, which meant whatever he needed to tell me had been sitting with him overnight and he hadn't slept well with it. I know CO's rhythms. 4 years does that. I sat down. He turned his cup on the desk. The same small, unconscious gesture as Kale with his, and I noticed that, and I noted that I noticed it, and I filed it somewhere I wasn't examining yet. Operation closed clean, he said. Dorian's in federal custody. The network's financial layer is exposed. 3 of the 6 regional nodes are already being rolled up by partner agencies. He paused. Good work. Thank you. He turned his cup again. Ren, he said. There it was. The specific way he says my name when the real part of the conversation is starting. How long have you known Kale Voss was the original target? The room went very quiet. Not the hallway kind of quiet. The kind that happens inside your own skull when something rearranges. Say that again, I said. CO looked at me steadily. When the Omega data trafficking investigation opened 14 months ago, the original person of interest wasn't Dorian Mercer. He turned his cup one more time, then stopped, like he'd decided to be still for this part. It was Kale Voss. I heard the words. I understood the words. My brain was doing the thing it does under operational shock, processing cleanly, clinically, while somewhere underneath that cleanliness, something was starting to crack along a line I hadn't known was there. On what basis? I said. Financial irregularities at Voss Capital, movement patterns that matched early network behavior, 2 informants who placed him adjacent to 2 separate Omega trafficking events. CO's voice was even, not unkind. The voice of someone delivering information they verified. The board removal, like the reputation destruction. Our early assessment was that it was internal cleanup. Someone covering evidence by discrediting the source. Dorian set that up, I said. We know that now. Dorian built the evidence to take Kale's company. We know that now, CO said. Yes. Then, the original file on Voss hasn't been formally closed. He held my gaze. The informants who placed him at those events, one has recanted, one hasn't. Until that's resolved, Kale Voss remains an open secondary person of interest in the trafficking investigation. I sat very still. He's not involved, I said. Ren, SEO. I spent 10 days in operational proximity with this man. I have 4 months of pattern analysis on this network. Kale Voss was a target, not a participant. I believe you, he said immediately. I believe your assessment. I'm telling you the institutional reality. He paused. The unreacted informant is connected to someone with political interest in keeping this complicated. It's being managed. But until it's resolved, your contact with Voss as an asset needs to be reported in full. Everything, every meeting, every conversation, He stopped. We looked at each other. Every what? I said quietly. Every material development in the relationship. The word relationship sat in the middle of his desk like something neither of us had put there intentionally. It was an asset relationship, I said. I know that's what you're going to write in the report, Sayo said, gently. The specific gentleness of a man who knows more than he's been told and is choosing not to make it harder than it has to be. And I know that's partly true. I'm telling you that whatever else it is, it needs to be declared. Because if it isn't, and the secondary file on Voss surfaces through the wrong channel, it doesn't just end your operation. He paused. It ends you. And it gives someone a very clean way to discredit everything we built against Dorian. I looked at the concrete wall through his one window. I thought about 10 days of kitchen tables and cold tea and overgrown plants. I thought about I just needed to say something true. I thought about standing outside Aldrich's in the cold with a warm neck and a man who said, "I'm not asking for a promise." "Who is the unreacted informant?" I said. CO shook his head. SEO. That's above what I can share right now. Is it someone in Dorian's network? He was quiet for a moment, then, the person has connections to people in Dorian's network. Whether they were directed by Dorian or acting independently. He stopped. It's being looked at. So someone who wanted Kale destroyed either worked with Dorian or separately arrived at the same conclusion, I said slowly. And that person gave us information that opened this investigation, which means the investigation that caught Dorian may have been started by someone who wanted to use us to finish what Dorian started, CO said quietly. Yes, that's the shape of it. I pressed my fingers against the table. Kale had been set up from two directions. Dorian had taken his company. Someone else had tried to take his freedom. And the mechanism they'd used, the investigation, the circuit, the operation, was the same mechanism that had put me in his orbit. I had been, without knowing it, a potential weapon aimed at him. The cracking underneath the clinical processing got louder. I need to tell him, I said. Ren, he has a right to know that he was the original person of interest. That there's still an open file. That someone used this investigation to... You can't tell him anything until the secondary file is formally closed, CO said. If you tell him now and it surfaces later that you disclosed active case information to a person of interest, he's not a person of interest. He's a victim. Institutionally right now, he is both. CO's voice was careful. I'm sorry, I know that's... Don't, I said. He stopped. We sat in his office with the concrete wall and the third green tea, and the shape of something I couldn't fix yet sitting between us. How long? I said finally. To close the secondary file. If everything moves cleanly, 2 weeks, maybe 3. And if it doesn't move cleanly? He didn't answer, which was its own answer. I went to Kale's apartment. I shouldn't have. There was no operational reason. The case was closed. The asset relationship was formally concluded. I had a report to write and a declaration to make and a secondary file to wait out, and I should have gone home and done all of those things in the correct order. I went to his apartment. He opened the door, and something in his face when he saw me, something that arrived before he could manage it, made the cracking worse. "Come in," he said. I came in. The kitchen looked the same. Plants still overgrown, books still soft-spined. Something on the stove that smelled like he'd been cooking at an unusual hour, which meant he hadn't slept either. I stood in the middle of his kitchen and I looked at him, and I tried to find the version of this that was clean. There wasn't one. "Something's wrong," he said, not a question. "I can't tell you what it is," I said. "Not yet. There are things being resolved, and until they are, I can't..." I stopped. "I need you to trust me for 2 weeks, maybe 3. He looked at me steadily. "Trust you about what?" That I'm not, that this wasn't. I stopped again, started differently. The things I said outside Aldrich's, those were true. I need you to hold on to that while I can't explain the rest. His jaw tightened slightly. You're telling me to wait without telling me what I'm waiting for. Yes? That's not. I know, I said. I know it's not fair. I know I'm asking for something I haven't earned the right to ask for yet. My voice stayed level. I needed it to stay level. I'm asking anyway. He looked at me for a long time. The kitchen was quiet. The something on the stove made a small sound. Outside the city. Are you in danger? He asked. No. Am I? A beat too long? Not from anything immediate. His eyes sharpened. He caught the specific shape of that pause. Of course he did. He catches everything. Maren. 2 weeks, I said. Please. The please landed somewhere in his expression and did something to it. Something complicated. He looked away, at the stove, at the window, at the overgrown plants. And I watched him make the decision I was asking him to make, watched him weigh it, watched him set down whatever question he most wanted to ask and pick up trust instead, like it was heavy, like he was choosing to carry it anyway. 2 weeks, he said. I breathed. Stay, he said then, quietly. I made food. It's too much for one person, and I made it at 4 a.m., which means I needed something to do with my hands, which means it probably turned out well. I looked at him. You don't have to explain the 4 a.m. part, I said. I know. I wanted to. A pause. Stay. I stayed. We sat at the kitchen table and ate food he'd made when he couldn't sleep and talked about nothing that mattered. A book he was reading about a failed Antarctic expedition, a specific memory I had of learning to cook that went wrong in a way that was funnier in retrospect. And the whole time, the thing I couldn't tell him sat in my chest like a stone I'd agreed to hold for a while. At some point, his hand was on the table near mine. Mine not touching, near. That specific nearness. I didn't move mine away. We stayed like that for a long time, not talking eventually, just sitting in the quiet of his kitchen with the city doing its thing outside, and the plants not being dealt with, and his hand near mine on the table. Looking back, that was the last soft moment before everything broke. I didn't know it then. I should have held it longer. Stay with me, because what happened the next morning is the part I still can't say out loud without my whole chest going wrong. Chapter 8. My phone rang at 6 a.m. Not CO, unknown number. Encrypted routing, the kind that takes equipment I don't carry personally to identify. I almost didn't answer. Then I did, because the alternative was wondering, and wondering has always been worse for me than knowing. There was silence on the line for 2 seconds. Then a voice I didn't recognize, male, older. The specific cadence of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say, but wants it to sound unrehearsed. You should ask your handler why Kale Voss's name appears in the founding documents of 2 shell companies connected to the trafficking network. The line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed in the early gray light and held my phone and felt the stone in my chest get heavier. Then I called CO. He answered on the second ring, which meant he was already awake, which meant, "You got a call," he said. Not a question. SEO. Come in. Tell me now. A pause. The sound of him setting something down. The shell companies are part of Dorian's architecture. Kale's name appears in the founding documents because Dorian used it, forged signatures, with backdated filings. It's the same mechanism he used to fabricate the board evidence. Another pause. We found this 2 days ago. It was going to be in the formal briefing this afternoon. But the informant is the one who surfaced the shell company connection, before we had context for it. CO's voice was careful, measured. They gave us real information that led to real evidence. They just gave it to us framed in a way that pointed at Voss instead of Dorian. Who is it? I said. Silence. SEO. Who is the informant? A long pause. The kind that means the answer is going to change something. His name is Calix Renard, CO said. He's been Dorian Mercer's personal attorney for 11 years. He came to us 14 months ago claiming he wanted out, that he had evidence of the network that he'd share in exchange for immunity. A pause. What we didn't know until 72 hours ago is that he came to us on Dorian's instruction. He was a controlled asset. The immunity agreement, the information, the original person of interest, all of it was Dorian managing the investigation from the inside. I sat very still. Dorian knew about the investigation, I said slowly. From the beginning, yes. He let it run. He built it. He needed a clean legal mechanism to permanently destroy Kale Voss. An investigation that opened with Kale as a primary person of interest, that ran long enough to build a public record, that ended with, ideally, an arrest, or at minimum a permanent association with trafficking in any database that matters. CEO's voice was flat with the specific flatness of someone who is angry and has decided to be precise instead. We were the mechanism. Calix was the switch. The gray morning light did nothing helpful. What happened 72 hours ago? I said. What changed? Calix made contact again, independent of Dorian this time. He wants to renegotiate his immunity. Apparently watching Dorian get arrested made him reassess his loyalties. A pause. He told us everything. The full architecture, including his original instructions, and the secondary file on Kale. Formally closed as of yesterday evening, cleared, expunged from the active case record. SEO paused. I was going to tell you this afternoon. I pressed my hand flat against my knee. So I need to tell him, I said. Yes, Seo said. You do. I stood outside Kale's door for longer than I should have. Not because I didn't know what to say. I'd gone over it on the way there as clean, clear, in the right order. What the investigation had originally been, what his name had been used for, what Dorian had built, and why, what the last 14 months had actually been structurally from the outside. I knew what to say. I just didn't know what it would do to him. I knocked. He opened the door in the way of someone who hadn't been back to sleep. Still dressed, same clothes as last night. The particular alertness of a person whose mind has been running since before dawn. He took one look at my face. Come in, he said, quiet, certain, like he'd been waiting for this specific visit. I came in. We didn't sit at the kitchen table this time. We stood in the middle of his living room, the room I'd barely been in before, full of the same soft-spined books and one lamp that cast everything amber. And I told him. All of it. The original person of interest. The forged documents. Calix and the controlled asset and the investigation that Dorian had built from the inside to finish what the board removal had started. The secondary file. The 2 weeks I'd asked him to wait while I couldn't explain why. I told him in the right order, clean, clear. He didn't interrupt. He stood very still in the amber light and listened the way he'd stood at the Mercer Gala. That specific stillness of a person controlling the only thing left that's theirs. And I watched his face do the thing it does, and the thing I've spent weeks learning to read. The upper register managing, the underneath registering everything, processing it in layers I could see moving behind his eyes. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. I waited. Outside, a bird started. Stopped. Started again. 14 months, he said finally. Yes. The entire investigation from the start. Yes. Dorian built it. His voice was even. too even. The specific evenness of something that has been compressed rather than resolved. He used the agency, used the investigation, was going to use... He stopped. Use me, I said quietly. Yes, he was going to use me. I didn't know. SEO didn't know. The whole operation was, you were almost the thing that finished destroying me, he said. Not an accusation, just a fact, laid flat. Yes, I said, because he deserved the clean version. Yes, if the investigation had run differently, if I'd been a different operative, if you hadn't... I stopped. If I hadn't what? I looked at him. If you hadn't said my name. Silent. When I stood in the middle of his living room and I let him have the minute. Then I let him have another one. The bird outside started again and this time kept going. When he turned back, his face was different, not broken, not the managed version either. Something between those two things, something human and unguarded and tired in the way that means tired of carrying rather than tired of being awake. You came here, he said. You came in person. Yes. You could have called. I know. He looked at me across the room. The distance between us was the length of his living room, further than we'd stood in weeks, further than any of the kitchens or corridors or cold streets. And somehow that distance was the most honest thing in the room. Why, he said. Not why did you come in person, just why. The full weight of the word. I looked at him. Because I needed you to see my face when I told you, I said. Because you've had 14 months of people managing information at a distance to use against you, and I didn't want to be another voice on a phone. I paused. And because I didn't, I don't want to do this from a distance, whatever this is. I don't want to manage it from a safe remove. Something moved through him. I watched it travel. The operation is closed, I said. The asset relationship is formally concluded. What I said outside Aldrich's, that wasn't operational. That was... I stopped. Found the true version. That was me. Just me. And I needed you to know that the two things are separate. What I was doing here and what I... Another stop. What I started feeling. Those are different. I need you to know they're different. He crossed the room. Not fast. Not urgent, just deliberate. The walk of a man who has made a decision and is done reconsidering it. He stopped in front of me, close. The kitchen close, the hallway close, the specific distance that had been undoing me for weeks. His hand came up again. The same way as the corridor, the same certainty. And this time it stayed. Palm against my jaw. Thumb at the corner of my mouth, warm, the specific warmth of someone who has been wanting to do something for a long time and has finally run out of reasons not to. My suppressants didn't fail this time, they just stopped mattering. Because this wasn't biology, and this was something slower and more specific and more mine. Built over 10 days of kitchen tables and cold tea. And a man who mapped the quiet rooms and said my name like it meant something before he knew anything about me. I know they're different, he said softly. I knew that already. Kale. I know, he said again. His thumb moved slightly at the corner of my mouth. Not much. Just enough. I'm not angry. I understand what happened. All of it. A pause. I need a second to be a person who was almost destroyed by something they didn't see coming. And then I need to be done with that. Okay, I said. Give me until tonight, he said, to be that person. Okay. And then he stopped. Something moved in his expression. Real and warm and certain. And then I'd like to be whatever comes after that. The amber light, the bird outside. His hand warm against my face. What comes after that, I said quietly, involves overgrown plants and too much tea, and you explaining your thing about failed expeditions. Something broke open in his face, the full version, not the ghost, not the almost. The real one, warm and genuine and tired in the best way, the way that means something has been set down. That, he said, is a very long conversation. I have time, I said. He looked at me for a moment longer, his hand still at my jaw. The distance between us the smallest it had ever been. Then his forehead dropped to mine. Just that. Foreheads together in the amber morning light. His breath and my breath and the city outside doing its ordinary thing. Indifferent and continuous, while inside this room something quietly, irrevocably became. We stayed like that for a long time. Not a kiss. Not yet. Something more careful than a kiss. The kind of closeness that is chosen slowly, held gently. That means I'm not going anywhere without needing to say it. I should have known then that this was not an ending, that somewhere in the architecture of what Dorian had built, something was still moving. I didn't know it yet. But that night, my phone rang again. Stay with me. Because what that call set in motion, I would spend the rest of my life trying to understand if I could have stopped it. Chapter 9. The number was CO's. That was the first wrong thing. CO doesn't call after 9 p.m. Not for anything that can wait. And in 4 years, I had learned that CO believes most things can wait until morning because most things look different in daylight and decisions made in the dark carry the dark inside them. It was 11 p.m. I was still at Kale's. We'd spent the evening the way he'd promised. Long conversation, bad tea, him explaining with genuine contained passion why the 1914 Imperial Transantarctic Expedition was the most instructive failure in modern leadership history, me listening and watching his face do the thing it did when he cared about something, the aliveness of it, the way caring made him look like an earlier version of himself, a version that hadn't spent 8 months learning to be still. I'd been memorizing it without meaning to. My phone lit up and I saw Seo's name, and something in my chest knew before I answered. I held up a finger to Kale, one moment, and stepped into the hallway. CO. Calix Renard is dead. His voice was flat. The specific flatness of someone managing shock by becoming precise. Found an hour ago. His immunity processing was scheduled for tomorrow morning. The hallway was cold and quiet. How? I said. They're calling it a medical event, cardiac. A pause. He was 41 and had no cardiac history? I pressed my back against the wall. Who knew about the renegotiation? I said. Who knew he'd flipped? That's the question. CO paused. The immunity negotiation was handled through a closed channel. Me, 2 senior analysts, the federal liaison, that's it. Another pause with a shape to it. And you. The word landed wrong. And me? I said slowly. I'm not suggesting. Who else knew I knew? Silence. Yeah, CO. Who else knew that I knew about Calix? The federal liaison was briefed on asset relationships connected to the case. Your name appears in that briefing as the operative who developed Voss as an asset. He stopped. The inference that you would have been informed of case developments is available to anyone who read the briefing, I said. Yes. I closed my eyes briefly. Someone had moved very fast. Within hours of Calix's decision to renegotiate, within hours of Dorian's arrest, someone had located a piece of the architecture that could fully dismantle the case and removed it, which meant someone in the closed channel, or someone who could read it. The case against Dorian, I said, without Calix's full testimony. His prior statements are on record. The physical evidence stands. It's not. The case doesn't collapse. SEO's voice was careful. But the complete picture of how the investigation was constructed, who built it, who directed it, that testimony was going to be the part that explained everything. Without it, Dorian's defense has room. A pause. They'll argue the investigation was compromised from the start. That evidence was manipulated. They'll use the original person of interest file on Voss, the one we closed, and they'll argue it demonstrates investigative bias or misconduct. They'll try to make Kale the story again, I said. Yes. I stood in the cold hallway, and I thought about a man in an amber-lit room explaining Shackleton with the specific animation of someone who has been careful and contained for so long that genuine enthusiasm feels like a risk he's choosing to take. I thought about I just needed to say something true. What do you need from me? I said. Nothing tonight. Come in at 7. He paused. There's something else? I waited. The federal liaison who received the briefing, CO said carefully. His name is Marsh. He's been the agency's federal interface on trafficking cases for 6 years. His record is... Another pause. I've been looking at his record for the last 3 hours. And there are patterns in case closures and asset handling, in the specific cases that have moved smoothly and the ones that haven't. It's not evidence, it's pattern. But the pattern looks like someone who has been managing outcomes, quietly, over a long time. Managing them for whom? I said. I don't know yet. His voice dropped slightly. But Dorian Mercer has been operating for at least a decade. A network that size, that duration, doesn't survive without someone inside the institutional structure keeping it stable. I pressed my hand flat against the wall. Marsh knew about Calyx, I said. Yes. Marsh knew about Kale's cleared file. Yes. Marsh knows my name. A pause that had weight. Wren, CO said, I need you to be careful. Tonight and tomorrow and until we understand what we're looking at. Another pause. Is Voss with you? I'm at his apartment. Stay there tonight. Don't go home. I'll have someone on your building by morning, but tonight... He stopped. Just stay. I thought about the service entrance at Aldrich's. Unlocked. I thought about a phone call at 6 a.m. from an encrypted number. And I thought about Dorian looking across the room at the Harlan reception and smiling the smile of a man confirming something. Someone's been watching the operation longer than we knew, I said. Yes? Since the beginning. Possibly. SEO. I made myself ask it. The original tip that opened this investigation, the one that came before Calyx. Before any of this, where did that come from? The longest pause yet. It came through Marsh, CO said quietly. The hallway was very cold. I stood there for a moment after the call. Just a moment. Long enough to let the shape of it settle. The full architecture of what we were inside, how deep the roots went, how many layers of managed outcome were stacked beneath what looked like a clean operation. Then I went back into the living room. Kale looked at me once and stood up. Not dramatically, just stood. The way he stood when he decided something required him to be upright. Tell me, he said. So I told him. Not everything, not Marsh. Not the institutional depth of it. Not the parts that were still CO's to manage, but Calyx. The death. The testimony that was gone now. What it meant for the case. What it might mean for him. He listened the way he always listened. Still, complete. Processing in layers. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, they're not done. No, I said. I don't think they are. Dorian has someone inside. We think so. He nodded slowly, not panicked, not the stillness under pressure that I'd first seen at the Mercer Gala, that managed, compressed thing. This was different. This was a man who had been taking apart the architecture of his own destruction for 8 months and had just been handed another piece. Grief had become fluency. That's the only way I know how to say it. You can't go home, he said. I know. Stay. He said it the same way he'd said it about dinner. Matter of fact, like the answer was obvious. The couch is, I'm not sleeping on your couch. He looked at me. I'm not, I said. Given everything, that's a strange place to put a boundary, but the guest room, he said, the ghost of a smile. I have a guest room. It has a door that closes. Oh. Yes, I said. Okay. We stood there for a moment. Ren. His voice was quiet. Are you afraid? I thought about the honest answer. I'm alert, I said carefully. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Alert means I'm paying attention. Fear means it's getting in the way. I paused. I'm paying attention. He looked at me for a long moment. Something moved in his expression. Something that had been building all evening, all week, that was having a harder time being contained now. I spent 8 months afraid, he said. I didn't name it that. I called it other things. Vigilance, strategy, assessment. But it was fear. The specific kind that comes from not knowing who is still coming for you. He paused. I don't want that for you. The amber lamp. It's not the same, I said quietly. No, he agreed. You're better equipped. You're trained for this and you're better at it than I was, and you have CO and... He stopped. Something crossed his face. I still don't want it for you. There was nothing operational about the way he said that. Nothing strategic or useful. Just a person who didn't want something for another person. The pure, simple weight of it. I looked at him standing in his living room in the amber light, with his soft-spined books and his overgrown plants and the 3 a.m. food in his fridge, and I thought about Dorian across a room smiling and Marsh's name on a briefing document and a 6 a.m. call from an encrypted number and all the unseen architecture of a thing that wasn't finished. And underneath all of that, quieter than all of that, the specific feeling of a forehead against mine in morning light, something not yet named, being held carefully. I know, I said. He nodded, reached over and turned off the lamp. Not abruptly, just naturally. The gesture of someone ending the evening version of a day. Guest room is the second door, he said. The lock works. There's a window that opens if you need the exit. You checked, I said. Of course I checked. He looked at me in the dark. Sleep if you can, I'll be... He nodded toward the couch. You're not sleeping on your own couch. I'm not sleeping, he said simply. I'll be here. I looked at him for a moment. Kale. Go, he said quietly. I'll be here. I went. I lay in the guest room in the dark with the window cracked and the city doing its low continuous thing outside and my phone on the pillow beside me, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about all of it. Marsh and Calix and Dorian in custody and the investigation built on a lie. Inside a lie. I thought about CO's voice. When he said I've been looking at his record for 3 hours, I thought about the original tip came through Marsh, which meant the whole thing, every part of it. With the 14 months, the circuit, the gala, the service uniforms and the cold tea, and the list on the kitchen table, had been set in motion by someone whose name I now knew. Someone who was still inside the institution. Someone who now knew mine. I turned onto my side. Through the wall I could hear nothing. Just the quiet of a person keeping their word, being there. I closed my eyes. I keep coming back to this part. Lying in his guest room, listening to the silence of him and thinking, this is what it feels like just before something breaks. This specific stillness. This specific, almost safe. I should have stayed awake. I didn't. And sometime before dawn, while I was sleeping, Kale made a decision I didn't know about. One that would cost him more than anything Dorian had ever taken. What he did next destroyed my entire life. Subscribe. Because the next story starts where this one broke. Chapter 10. I woke to an empty apartment. Not just an empty room, the specific empty of a space where someone was recently present and chose to leave. The couch had been slept on briefly, a pillow displaced, a blanket folded with the particular neatness of someone who wanted to leave things orderly before they did something they knew couldn't be undone. His keys were on the table. His phone was beside them. And under his phone, a single sheet of paper with my name at the top in his clean, deliberate handwriting. The same handwriting as the list. The same pressure on the pen. Like every important thing he wrote the same way. Like it mattered that the letters were clear. Ren, Marsh knows your face now. He knows CO is looking at him. By morning, he'll know Calix talked before he died. And he'll understand that the case against Dorian survives without the testimony, which means the next move isn't legal. It's operational. I know how Marsh works. I know because he was one of the people Dorian used to manage the board removal. I didn't have a name for him until last night. When you said it and something I'd been carrying for 8 months finally had a shape. He was in the room, Ren, the night they took my company. Not visibly. He was the reason 2 board members changed their votes in the final hour. I saw him in the corridor. I didn't know what I was looking at. I know now. I'm going to give CO something he can use. A witness statement, a location. A direct connection between Marsh and the board removal that predates the investigation and establishes a pattern that can't be explained away. Dorian's defense can't use investigative bias if there's independent pre-existing evidence of Marsh's involvement. The case stays clean, you stay clean. I know you'll be angry. I know this is the kind of decision you would have talked me out of if I'd told you. That's why I didn't tell you. The things I said yesterday were true. I need you to hold on to that too. I read it twice. Then I sat on the edge of the couch and held the paper in both hands and felt something move through me that I didn't have clean language for. Not fear, not anger. Both of those, but underneath them something raw. Something that had no operational category. He'd left his phone so I couldn't call him. He'd left his keys so I'd know he wasn't coming back quickly. He'd folded the blanket. I called CO. He answered before the first ring finished, which meant he was already awake, which meant Voss contacted me 20 minutes ago, CO said, before I could speak. He's meeting Marsh. The room went cold. He called you, I said. He gave me a location and a time and a witness account of Marsh in the corridor the night of the Voss Capital Board removal. CO's voice was controlled and moving fast. It's Ren. It's exactly what we needed. The pre-investigation connection, the direct placement, the timeline. If it holds, it closes every gap Dorian's defense was going to exploit. He walked into a meeting with a man who had Calix killed, I said. I have people moving to the location now. How long? 18 minutes. Maybe 20. Where? Ren, CO. Where? He told me. I was already moving. The location was a private parking structure in the financial district, the kind of place that exists in the gaps between buildings, half forgotten, used by the kind of people who need to have conversations that don't appear on any record. 3 levels. Minimal lighting. The specific acoustics of concrete and low ceilings that make every sound arrive twice. I went in through the stairwell. 2nd level. That's what CO had said. 2nd level north corner. I heard the voices before I reached the door. Marsh first, older, measured, with the practiced calm of a man who has navigated dangerous conversations for a long time and knows how to keep his hands clean while his words do the work. Appreciate the gesture, Mr. Voss. Truly. But you've misunderstood the situation. Then Kale. Steady. Controlled. The voice I knew. I don't think I have. You're a man with a cleared file and a recently concluded asset relationship with an operative whose career depends on clean case outcomes. You have every reason to want this to look a certain way. A pause. Coming to me with allegations, to me specifically, suggests either courage or miscalculation. I'm genuinely uncertain which. I was in the corridor, Kale said. November 14th. I saw you speak to Heron and Lau 20 minutes before they changed their votes. I have a time-stamped record of where you were that night because I'd flagged you to my own security team. I didn't know why then. I do now. Silence. That's a significant claim, Marsh said. Yes. One that would be very difficult to substantiate after this much time. I have the security log, Kale said. My team's, not yours. Time-stamped, unedited, in a server that's been in independent legal custody since 6 months after the board removal because I knew something had happened that night and I didn't know what shape it would eventually take. A longer silence. I was at the stairwell door, hand on the bar. Still. You've been holding that for 6 months, Marsh said. Something had shifted in his voice. The practiced calm developing a texture underneath it. I've been holding it until I understood what it was for, Kale said. And now you've decided it's for this. Now I know what you are, Kale said. And I know what you did to the investigation. And I know that Calix Renard was 41 years old with no cardiac history. His voice stayed even. So yes, this is what it's for. The texture in Marsh's voice shifted again, became something else. You came here alone, Marsh said quietly. Without your operative, without your handler. With a piece of evidence you haven't yet transferred to anyone who could use it. A pause that had a shape. That's either very brave or... The server access was transferred to SEO's private case channel at 5:47 this morning, Kale said. Before I came here. Silence. Then why come at all? Marsh said. Very quiet now. Because I wanted to look at you, Kale said. Because for 8 months I've been trying to understand how someone decides to do what you did. To use an institution built to protect people as the mechanism to destroy them. I wanted to see what that looks like from the outside. A pause. It looks like nothing. That's the part I couldn't have understood from a file. It looks exactly like nothing. Something moved in the silence. Then the sound I'd been listening for, a shift in Marsh's footing. Weight redistributed. The specific sound of a decision being made physically. I pushed through the door. Marsh. My voice came out clean and flat in the concrete acoustic. Both men turned. Marsh looked at me with an expression that cycled through several things very fast. Recognition, calculation, the specific reassessment of someone who thought they'd understood the variables and has just discovered one was missing. Kale looked at me, his face, just for a second, just the underneath register, unmanaged, did something that went through me and came out the other side. Relief, the pure structural kind. Not I'm glad you're here, but I didn't want you to be here, and I'm glad you're here. Both of those simultaneously. The full contradiction of it. Agency response is 90 seconds out, I said, looking at Marsh. The server transfer completed. The security log is in institutional custody. There's nothing here that removes what's already in place. Marsh looked at me for a long moment. Then he did the thing I hadn't expected. He smiled, small, tired. The smile of a man who has been outmaneuvered and has enough self-awareness left to recognize it cleanly. How long, he said to me, have you known it was me? CO had the pattern 3 hours before your name, I said. He had your name by midnight. And Voss had your face in a corridor for 8 months, I said. He's been more patient than you gave him credit for. Marsh looked at Kale then. Something passed across his face. Not guilt, exactly. Something more complicated. The expression of a person confronting the specific human cost of abstracted decisions. I didn't design this to go where it went, Marsh said, to Kale, quietly. I know, Kale said. That's the part that's hardest to forgive. The agency team came through the north entrance 30 seconds later. It was over in the way that things are over when they've been building for a long time. Not with noise, not with drama, just with the quiet mechanical finality of handcuffs and procedure and the ordinary sounds of consequence arriving. I stood next to Kale and watched it happen. His arm was close to mine, not touching, close. When the team moved Marsh toward the exit, I felt Kale breathe. A single long exhale. The kind that carries something out with it. 8 months of something, maybe more. You read the note, he said. You left his phone, I said. You folded the blanket. I didn't want you to... I know, I said. I know what you didn't want. You left anyway. He was quiet. Kale? I turned to look at him. In the low concrete light, he looked real. Just real. A person standing in a parking structure at dawn having done the thing he decided to do with full knowledge of what it cost. You should have told me. You would have stopped me. Yes, I said. And then we would have found another way. There wasn't time for another way. There's always... Ren. He turned to face me fully. His voice was quiet. I know. I know there might have been another way. I know I made a unilateral decision that put me in a room with someone dangerous without telling you, and that is... I understand that's not... He stopped. Started differently. I didn't want you to be in this room. That's the truth. I knew what Marsh was, and I knew what he'd already done, and I didn't want you standing between me and that. The concrete breathed around us. That's not your decision, I said quietly. I know. I'm trained for this. You're not. You walked into... I know. His voice dropped. I know all of that, and I'd do it again. He held my gaze. Not because I think I was right, because I couldn't stand the idea of you being the one in the room this time, after everything. A pause. That's not rational. I know it's not rational. I looked at him. On the low light, the concrete, the sound of the agency team moving in the level below. It's not rational, I agreed. No. It's also the most... I stopped. The most what? He said softly. I shook my head slightly. Not unwilling. Unready. He looked at me for a moment. Then something settled in his expression. Patient. Warm. Certain. The expression of a man who has decided to wait and is at peace with the waiting. Okay, he said. We stood in the parking structure while the city outside began its early gray shift toward morning, the specific light of a day that doesn't know yet what it's going to be. Somewhere below us, doors. Movement. The ordinary sounds of a thing finally ending. His hand found mine in the low light, not reaching, just there. Fingers alongside fingers, warm and certain and asking nothing. I looked down at our hands. Then I turned mine over and held on. Looking back, that was the first moment that felt like after. Not almost after, not the edge of after, actually after. I didn't know then what after would look like. I still don't know entirely. There are open files and institutional processes and the long, slow work of rebuilding things that were taken. But I know what his hand feels like in mine in a concrete parking structure at dawn. And I know that he folded the blanket. And I know that some things, once held, are very difficult to put down. That's the part I keep coming back to. That's the part I think about in the quiet rooms. What he did next destroyed my entire life. Hard cut, subscribe. Because the next story starts where this one broke. The end.